Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this guy right here. This is the QSP Knives Kylin. Oh, Kylin, you're an affair here. So first off, though, I want to thank very sincerely my my viewer Lynn, who sent this guy along. He said, Nick, I bought a knife. It ain't for me, but it might be for you. Here you go. And thank you very much for that, Lynn. I'm going to go ahead and do my review, and then I'll throw this guy in the box for the next charitable giveaway. So he's done some beautiful things, and I got a chance to look at something that I would not have checked out otherwise. So thank you for that, Lynn. Next thing, let's do a little bit of a size comparison here. Here it is against the Spyderco PM2. So you can see here, this is a, it's a big one. Here it is against the Ontario Rat number 2. This remains a big one. Here it is against Spyderco Delica. Yep, pretty big. And then a knife that is perhaps closer to its this knife's spiritual realm. This is the Cold Steel Voyager XL. Yeah. It's a little smaller than that. So anyways, there is that. And then finally, a quick note. What the heck is a QSP? No, it's not like a new wired communication standard or anything like that. QSP Knives is a relatively new Chinese brand that has been doing actually a pretty big diversity of stuff. You've got the QSP Parrot, which is like 20 bucks and absolutely good to go, all the way up to some of the higher end stuff like this guy, which is 215 bucks, by the way. And that's, you know, so yeah, that's a thing. Then finally, a quick note. This is going to be a quick review, because honestly, I suspect that pretty much every human who's watching this already knows whether or not they're interested in this particular knife, just from seeing it on the table here. So we'll talk a little bit about what I'm liking here, what I'm not liking so much, and then we'll go into our final conclusion. On the good side, you know, there are some nice details here. At some level, this design is completely and totally ridiculous. It feels like USA has been moonlighting a little bit. The designer of many of the gas station knives we know and love. That's not actually a human that I'm aware of, but maybe he is, or she, for that matter. Anyways, this does have some nice design elements to it. I mean, this is a milled titanium pocket clip right here, with some actual extra milling done in there. If we look on the side here, we've got this fluting going on. We've got differential anodization, where the highs are anodized differently than the lows. We have an inlay of carbon fiber right here that is actually appears to be a real inlay. This doesn't look like a sticker. This is actually a carbon fiber inlay. We've got an actual pivot here that actually has some detail to it. The blade itself has this whole affair in the back here, which is certainly a thing. But you've got the black versus the ground, the black flats versus the ground bevels here. You've actually got a reasonable polish on the knife here, which is pretty impressive. Detail-wise, this actually is pretty impressive for 215 bucks. Most of the time, in that kind of price range, you are getting plain gray titanium handles. And so, at that level, this brings a sort of value to the world. Whether this is something that you value becomes an entirely different sort of question. But there is actually a lot going on here relative to the price point in terms of those little details. This feels like a knife that's from a relatively small, relatively unknown manufacturer that's just trying to flex a little bit and say, hey, look, we can do all of this crazy stuff. You should maybe bring us designs, or you should look at some of our other work. And so at that level, I have to say, I do appreciate that. There are also some other nice details in the design itself. For instance, the pocket clip is somewhat mirrored by this thing on the other side there. Whether you find any of this convincing from a design standpoint, partial backspacer, etc. And by the way, the lanyard hole is going through the backspacer, and the backspacer is all the way through. You know, there is actually a fair amount to enjoy here. You can also see you've got a different anodization color on the inside of the backspacer there. We have full, actually, well, not full, but we do have a lot of internal milling here to reduce the weight. And actually, that makes this knife, although it's freaking huge, we're coming in, you know, maybe 3.8 inches here. This is pretty serious. It actually makes the knife surprisingly lightweight. This guy's coming in here at 134 grams or 4.74 ounces. It's not exactly the lightest thing ever, but at the same time, you know what? It feels, considering how big this thing is, I can almost see it. So that's a pretty impressive thing. And so, yeah, we've got that guy right there. Other good things about this, at some level, the grind work is actually pretty decent as well. You've got yourself sort of a compound grindy sort of thing with this little area here that's a little bit thicker in the front, coming to a thinner, more hollow sort of thing in the middle there. The grind itself has been done pretty well. It seems pretty symmetrical, which is actually impressive. I don't know whether this is machine or hand ground, although it certainly looks hand ground, which is cool. And, you know, honestly, this definitely has a style to it. Whether you like that style or not is an entirely unrelated question. But there is no doubt that this is very different than a lot of the generic titanium frame locks that come out of these kinds of companies. There is somebody out there whose style this absolutely is. Yeah, so that's definitely a thing. And then finally, I have to say, on this guy, the action and such is good. Oops, helps if I go the right direction. But it actually has a reasonable, it's a little gritty, but that'll probably wear in as the detent ball path is sort of worn in through the paint. But nevertheless, and the action is 100% reliable. This has a very solid deployment, blade of S35V, and at some level, the details, I'm sorry, it's there. It's not a bad knife, like at a functional level here. And so, at least to me, all of that roughly is the good here, is that it's actually got a surprising amount of detail in production that makes this guy feel actually like a pretty decent value for the $215 that you're paying for it here, with actual inlays, things like that. The action on it is absolutely fine. It's good to go. This is a solid little action here. It's got all kinds of internal milling that makes it lighter than you would expect it to be at this level, and honestly, the grind work on it is pretty cool. On the bad side, there were a couple of big ones on here. For me, these kinds of backside serrations, they are actually borderline sharp. They're not like I'm going to cut things open, but I bet I could saw through some wood with these guys. Mind you, you wouldn't want to, because they're on the back of a folding knife here. And unless you want to do it with the knife folded, going back and forth like that, that seems like a... And so ultimately, what this is probably going to do more often is just catch as you're trying to put this guy into your pocket. And so I think it's a design touch, certainly, and these aren't the first people to do it, but I don't think it's a great idea, generally speaking. I think there's a reason that most pocket knives don't include anything like that. That is very much for the eye, but functionally speaking, it's not a great thing. Next thing, the edge on this guy is a little bit thick. If we look particularly at this front area, but given it's got the differential grind, but it is definitely a little bit thick behind the edge. I'd like to see them go a little bit more aggressive, particularly on this other hollow part here, to get that edge just a little bit thinner. I think that would make it a little bit more compelling, and just overall, maybe a slight reduction in stock thickness, although it's not so bad given the height of the grind, might make this guy a little bit better of a cutter. Next thing, this is using a recurve here. And given it is certainly a recurve, they are going for it, and that is a part of the design. And given that this knife is so much more for the eye than it is for the pocket, this is very much art knife? Depending on your definition of art, yeah, that's going to be a thing. But anyways, this is going to be a pain to sharpen on flat bench stones, things like that, requiring a rod-based, a guided sort of system. And so that's definitely something you want to keep in mind. Recurve knives can have some advantages for cutting power, but honestly, this is not going to be a great functional choice, I think, for most people. And then finally, on the bad side, I showed this to my wife, and she started laughing. I saw this on QSP's table, and I started laughing. This does not mean that this is necessarily a bad design. What this does indicate, though, is that this is probably not going to be a design that is universally well-loved and accepted by everybody else everywhere. There are going to be a lot of people for whom this knife feels like it has been dropped on the way to the gas station, and that's certainly a thing to consider. However, if you're loving the design, you know what? It's actually well done, and actually that kind of brings us into the final conclusion. The simple fact is that you don't need me to give you a final conclusion here. There is no human out there who has not already made up their mind about this knife. Either you are looking at this knife and going, and that pretty much sums up your feelings on the matter. In that case, this is probably not the knife for you, as you have already ascertained at this point in time in your life. Or, on the other side, there are going to be people who look at that and go, you know what? That's kind of badass right there. And you know what? I can kind of see it. At some level, this is a company that nobody freaking knows about, or at least relatively few people do, just going all out. They're just saying, you know what? Screw you. We're making the Kylin. And they did. And they did it up big. That's the other thing. And that's the thing that really makes this not just like a, oh, LOL sort of thing, is the fact that it's clear that they did put a lot of effort into this. Things like the inlaid carbon fiber, things like the differentially anodized, all of these little details here, even just the grind. Somebody actually does care about making this knife well. And so what you have here is a design that is going to be controversial, a design that not everybody is going to love. And in fact, and a design that, you know, by the way, if you take this out in the lunchroom, people are going to be diving under the tables while laughing, which is going to be a thing. But I can see a group of people for whom this is going to be absolutely cool. They're going to look at that and go, you know what, for $215, that's well enough done. And I think that's badass enough that why not, right? And you know what? By all means, go for it. And so I guess that's my final conclusion here. At some level, this thing is absolutely and totally freaking ridiculous. I know that, you know that, even the people who love it know that. But at another level, it's done well enough that that doesn't matter. For people who love it, this is going to be a very interesting choice. This is going to be a knife that actually I don't really particularly have trouble recommending. This part's going to be problematic for it. You know what you're getting into here, but they've done it well enough. They have made it happen well enough that if you're looking at this and going, you know what? Okay, I like this. That's badass. I am not going to stop you. So there you go. I hope that you found this interesting. At the very least, you've gotten a good laugh. Or perhaps this knife is Kylin your name. And you'll find a good home for this actually surprisingly well-done knife in the future. QSP, I gotta say, I'm kind of impressed. Not necessarily my taste particularly, but at the same time, if they're doing this well, when they start doing other designs that might be a little bit more my style, I'm keeping my eyes open. So, anyways, there you go. I hope this has been interesting to you, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.